Russian Revolution of 1917 divided the world into two ideological camps, capitalist and communist. For the next 70 years, the communists would wage a war of words and images against their capitalist enemies. The goal? To capture the hearts and minds of the Soviet masses with disinformation. To turn them against the enemy, who they said ruthlessly exploited the average citizen. To turn them toward the state, run by peasants and workers, which cared about their welfare and guaranteed them health, education, and a shining future. A minority party with approximately 200,000 members, the Bolsheviks in 1917 assumed the leadership of 160 million people, scattered across the world's largest continuous landmass. They spoke more than 100 languages and were, for the most part, illiterate. Masters of visual propaganda, after seizing power, the Bolsheviks produced tens of thousands of political posters. Striking pictures and stirring slogans communicated party ideology. Lenin proclaimed cinema the most important art for promoting communist ideology. The animated war for the minds of the people began with short political commercials that delivered the state's message in a clear and entertaining manner. Shown in cinemas everywhere, they encouraged people to form collective farms and join the Communist Party. They promoted the state's tailored vision of Soviet history and fanned hatred of the Americans, the British, the Germans, the Japanese, and world capitalism. The country most regularly targeted by the animated propaganda films was the United States. It was important to keep the Soviet people, most of whom were locked up in the USSR, believing that they lived in the best country of the world. From the 30s to the end of the 70s, Americans were depicted as evil racists, unemployed, exploited workers, and warmongers.
When we saw very seldom American movies, Hollywood movies, with all these brilliant environment, cars and wealthy people, we were taught this is Hollywood backstage, this is only decoration, it's not a real life. They could make in Hollywood everything. But people are suffering, they're hanging black people.
In 1922, Vladimir Mayakovsky, the dashing propagandist and poet of the Bolshevik Revolution, received special permission to sail across the Atlantic. He landed first in Cuba, where U.S. corporations ran both the sugar and tobacco industries. His observations were memorialized in a poem called Black and White, which, using Mayakovsky's own drawings, was turned into an animated film in 1933.
I feel like a motherless child, a long ways from home, a long ways from home.
Black and White tells the story of Willie, the old black shoeshine man. Willie makes the fatal mistake of asking the white sugar king, Mr. Brogg, why should white sugar be made by a black man?
Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long ways from home.
The film concludes, poor Willie didn't know he could ask the Communist International for help.
Big Brother understood that it was not effective to show the whole country as a bad. So for us, America was divided in two parts. A big, fat Uncle Sam, capitalists, and poor working class, working people who are exploited, and black people, working people. And we were very sympathetic to black people. When first black people came to Russia in the 60s, we were so glad to meet them, and we were very friendly, more friendly to blacks than to whites, because we felt that they are our friend, they are closer to us than whites.
My great-grandfather Samuel Marshak wrote the poem Mr. Twister in 1933. In early 1920s, an American businessman came to Soviet Union and he wanted to stay in a hotel in Leningrad. And apparently when he saw a black person there, he immediately checked out. My great-grandfather found the story interesting and he wrote a poem that quickly became very popular and later on saved his life. In late 30s, during the terrible times of Stalin terror, when millions of people, mostly professionals, were killed, Stalin's hand, of course, reached to almost all of Marshak's co-workers. Of course, my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother were awaiting arrest, but it never came. And here, Mr. Twister came to the play. In 1937, when Stalin was given his daily list of future victims for approval, Marshak's name was on the list. And when Stalin went through it, he saw the name of Samuel Marshak and said, "Oh, Samuel Marshak, that's a good Soviet children's poet." And those words saved my great-grandfather.
Once a government minister, Mr. Twister now lives in Chicago, where he is a banker, owner of factories, newspapers, and ships. Mr. Twister decides to take a vacation with his family. They could go anywhere in the world, but daughter Susie insists on Leningrad. They sail to the Soviet Union on a ship for white people only. The only black people are down below, shoveling coal. They sail into Leningrad with their car, the Twister Mobile. They drive to the Angleterre Hotel, where Mr. Twister has made reservations. On their way to the rooms, a black man appears at the top of the stairwell. As he descends, his image doubles and triples and quadruples to many black people, all looking alike, all walking down the stairs. Enraged, the Twisters leave the hotel. The Soviet concierge recognizes that the Americans must be taught a lesson. He places calls to all the other Leningrad hotels. At each hotel, the bellman informs Mr. Twister, "Sorry, no rooms. No rooms. No rooms." Mr. Twister returns to the Angleterre. After the millionaire spends a night on the hotel sofa, he happily agrees to take a room in the hotel, even if the other guests are people of color. Ordinary Soviet citizens have successfully educated a rich American racist.
Soon after World War II ended, the Cold War began. An early victim was jazz. Condemned,